solemn dedication of this memorial with a land acknowledgement by grade 12 student Alex Kahn, CASA member and active Indigenous ally.
We would like to acknowledge the land and all those who live, breathe, and play on this land. We would also like to acknowledge and honor the languages of this land, the many spoken by people now, as well as the original names that were given to the first people on this land. We gather here in the traditional Treaty 7 territory of Nipuwoltin, a land that was stolen from a people whose culture and way of life were attacked and marginalized. The past cannot be changed, but the small things that we do to restore part of what was stolen can help. We can thank the land for what it gives us every day. To use language is to respect, and a name holds great power. When we call a place by its original name, we remember and honor. And with revival of the language, we will remember for as long as the star shines, the wind blows, and the river flows.
For over 150 years, most Indigenous children in Canada were taken from their families and forced into residential schools. Residential schools systematically undermined Indigenous, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit cultures across Canada, and disrupted families, severing the ties that sustained culture. Because they were removed from their families, many students grew up without experiencing a nurturing family. The devastating effects are far-reaching and long-lasting. Many students did not come home. Good morning, students and staff of James Fowler High School. My name is Chloe Ebers. More than a year ago, 215 students were found in a mass grave in Kamloops at the site of a former residential school. These children were buried in silence. They had no grieving parents at their graveside. No one in the community knew. This memorial project came about because we wanted to remember them. We wanted to remember their names. A group of students and teachers came together to create the memorial. They are Michael L., Francis D., Parker B., Mr. Yarshay, Miss Whiteley, Casa, and Miss Hughes. You can find the memorial in our library. Today, you will hear from former National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Phil Fontaine, Elder Dwayne Mistaken Chief, and other James Fowler students. We will be remembering those stolen by the residential school system.
I'm honored to stand before you here today to speak a few words about the memorial that's been established at your school to honor the children that were left in unmarked graves and other inappropriate situations without proper blessings as they pass from this life to the next. And the memorial is a wonderful statement that lends dignity in our own way to these children. Thank you.
You to Alex Potts. She's Cris from Maskwacis and Stony Nakota from Alexis First Nation. Alex composed this poem after the discovery of the many unmarked graves at the sites of former residential schools. Her poem is called Beyond the Grass We Lay.
Beyond the grass we lay, kept and bound to the loss of what we've known, left wondering, hoping, thought after thought, threaded together, binded by strings. Those who've survived us courses through the blood, not forgotten, for reasons beyond control. We see our dreams were lost, trapped within walls. Left to the significance, drumming to the beat of our hearts, to feel the dirt between our toes. Look back and wonder, where will this journey take you throughout your age of dreams? Where we've left, we see there is no end to our misery.
Albert Wayne, we'd like to offer you this gift of tobacco in exchange for your knowledge and bringing that to us to share with our students in the County Board of Education at James Fowler. Thank you very much.
I come from a family of 10 siblings, 10 full siblings. We have our youngest brother is at Halluci. His mother was actually from Sweden and from a prominent family, David Crowchild. Crowchild Trail is named after him. All that was his grandfather. And first of all, my parents, they both went to residential school. And how that all started, way back was after the treaties were signed, and the children were brought to industrial schools like the one in Dunbo, south of California. Part of that process was to make them more capitalistic, also to take their identity. Although I saw a lot of them still had their braids, the pictures that I saw. But their last names, for the most part, were changed. That's where McDonald, Smith, Wells, and so on come from. And some of them managed to keep their names. I'm not sure why that happened. And so following the industrial schools, then came the residential schools. They started off as mission schools, and then with more funding, they built these huge brick buildings. There's two of them on the Blood Reserve. On other reserves, there's usually one, or even for a whole area, it would be one that's quite a bit smaller than what we have. So we have two of those that are almost identical. One was the St. Paul's Residential School, and the other one was the St. Mary's Residential School. So the St. Paul's was the Anglican residential school. That was built around 1927, 26, somewhere in there. Prior to that, they were in wood buildings on different parts of the reserve. One was in the middle part in the standoff on the central west, and a little bit north of there was the Anglican residential school, or the early residential school. And I talked to those elders, and they said those places were really cold. The wind would blow through the walls. But they did have 2 floors, at least for the Anglican residential school. And so that's where they kept warm. Down below, it was always cold, no matter how much they tried to keep it warm. So it was heated by wood stoves, pretty big pot belly stoves. Right around 1963 that I went to school, 62, 63, somewhere. It usually I was born in 57, so about maybe 52 that I went there. I don't know if I went at 5 years old or 6, because I didn't go to the kindergarten there. I went straight to grade 1. So there was a lot of fear, but then, I made friends, quite early. But then there's some other kids that were, I guess, weren't so fortunate. They weren't so confident. They got picked on a lot by the students, and also some of the teachers would gravitate to those kids, and then kind of jump into the fray, and they would treat them bad as well. So I never really understood that part. And so what I learned from those early days was to fight, because I didn't want to be one of those kids that got picked on. So even though I was always one of the smallest kids, I started fighting, and then you don't necessarily have to win the fight, it's just that people don't like it when they get hit back. So that was the approach. And then pretty soon I was being recruited by other kids. There was somebody picking on me, would you straighten him up and that kind of thing. So I learned early to start fighting in school. And so that was in day school. So I was able to go home each end of the day and then return the next morning. But we're still being indoctrinated through our with Catholicism. So everything was, there was religion involved in everything that we did. Between classes we'd pray, next class the same thing, and so on. Then we had the catechism. And we had, like I said, my first teacher was a nun. And then after that, then some civilian teachers would start coming in. And there was fewer nuns at that point that actually taught. But with my older siblings and my parents, the nuns and priests were all still there. That's not to say there was no priests where I was. I mean, the principal and the administrator were priests, and then they had these brothers that were there as well, that were supervisors. But in particular, it's the nuns that I found quite mean. I saw a lot of children that were beaten. And once I got old enough, my parents told me, okay, you're going to start going to residential school now. You have to go. And I didn't understand that. And basically my whole world fell apart there. I thought, I'm going there and never coming back. That's what I thought. So I totally freaked out. I was hiding anywhere I could, trying to be invisible, hoping somebody would forget me and I'd stay home, but that didn't happen. My parents negotiated with me, and the more they tried to settle me down, the more I freaked out, because I knew that this is the end. But they finally relented. My father said, okay, we win this time. We're going to let you stay home one more year, but the deal is you get to stay home this 1 year, but next year, I was happy that I was going to stay home. I'd still be going to the same school, just not staying there all week. I was quite happy about that, and I would worry about next year when that came. But the following year, when I finally did go, it was okay. I figured, look, there's no way out of it, so I had accepted that I was going to go. And when I showed up there, I saw a bunch of familiar faces, so I was okay. But it wasn't long before I started fighting again, because I was getting picked on, or other kids were getting picked on. And why they asked me to fight? Because I was one of the smallest ones. So I was there through the first year, witnessed a lot of beatings. There was one particular nun that seemed to have a liking for belts with a silver tip on, and that would be her very favorite thing to beat on the kids with. And these were kids that were in the lower level. Those were the junior fighters. And I was in the intermediate boys when I went to residential school. And there's one scene that really stands out where it was early in the morning. That particular nun had come to get our help to move a couple of beds. And so we showed up there, and she was talking to us, and one of the kids came running, and she said, anyway, he had thrown up, and that would be about flu season. The young boy couldn't talk proper English, so he said, my brother vomited. And the nun said, what? Like real sharp. And she always had her hands like this, like a sergeant. And she would pace. And so anyway, she was standing over him, and he said, what? Vomited? And he was ridiculing him for doing so. And he said, yeah. And then finally he said, throw up. So that nun went, and she grabbed that belt and started whipping that kid that was sick. Like, what's he going to do? And then, some children would wet the bed. There'd be a pee parade every morning. And today we know, like, you could have a small bladder and you can't hold your urine very long, or other things. Or even the stress of being there would cause you to wet the bed. So the more she beat them, the more they wet the bed. Even at that age, I thought, this is pretty darn inhumane. So I got through my first year. Then the following year I went back. Like I said, I was always fighting. A lot of the times to protect other kids. In that second year, I finally got tired of fighting. I got into one more fight. I was sent up to the dormitory with no supper. And I was sitting up there. It's the first time that I had to sit up there in the dark. And I was looking outside and I thought, this is it. I'm going to stay. I don't care what happens. I'm running away. I boldly walked down the stairs, walked through the rumpus room. It was about this size. I came in that door. I walked across and all the other boys looked at me and they said, you're not supposed to be here. So? So they followed me. Most of them followed me into the locker room, and somebody was keeping an eye and make sure that nobody came in. And they kept repeatedly asking me, so you're going to run away? And I said, yeah. Where are you going to go? I'm going home. So this is Blackfoot. So they're saying, are you sure? You're really doing it? They kept asking over and over. Are you really? I said, yeah, well, look, I got my clothes all folded in the laundry bag. So I even took the time to fold it, because that's what we were trained to do. And then I put on my home clothes. In fact, from those days, I've got I call them my jailhouse tattoos. One of the boys had stolen some India ink, and then we found the needles, so we made our own tattoos. A bunch of us sitting in that very locker room where I was getting ready to run away. They continued to ask, and I walked out the door, went down there's a little bit of a catwalk, and then the stairs go down. And then the senior boys are right underneath us, so there's a lot of light there, so I had to make sure I wasn't in the light very long. And I started going up towards home. If I walk as the crow flies, wouldn't be too far. I didn't walk very far, and I thought, it's freezing up here. I'm going to have to find some other option. Then I remembered my parents sometimes go to the church basement, and that's where this Parliamentary Society would have their meetings, and they'd have their dances under the church. Kind of reminds me of The Great Escape. You watch for that light pass and then run. Well, I had to do that with the lights, because there's a series of four windows on one side and another four on that side, and we're never supposed to cross this imaginary line between the girls' side and the boys' side. If you get caught, you're in big trouble. So that was the other thing. So I had to go from one point, look in the window, next, and finally got clear of the whole school. And then I ran to the church. So I went over there, I opened the door, looked in, a bunch of blankets on the seat, because my dad used to always tell us, always carry blankets, you never know what's going to happen. And then I thought, well, I'm going to double check. I need to go check for my parents. I snuck over to the window by the church basement, and I peeked in. Just as I peeked in, I saw them come dancing down the dance. It's similar to the round dance, but it's only two people. And I thought, good, they're here. That's the trouble. So I went back, flipped those blankets, crawled under there, and then I covered myself. Waited there. It didn't take long, and I was asleep. And what woke me up was voices and cold air, and then somebody flipping the blankets off. I just heard them saying, there's somebody in there. And so when they pulled them off, I looked up, and my dad asks me, so what are you doing here? It's a Derksen. And I told him, I'm going home. So then he told my mother, well, I guess he wants to go home. So I ended up going home with them. And I was never returned. To this day, I don't know why, because everybody was being brought back to the school. But I was one of the lucky ones. And the irony is, we were always taught that if we don't follow that Christian way that we were being taught, we're going to go to the big fire. They're going to be used as firewood. They're going to burn forever. Or the other term would be gidagistach, which means you're going to go under. Well, the irony is my parents were under.
They were under already.
And it was the people under there that saved me. So I was never brought back, but I went back to the same school. But after a few days, I think when things settled down, I went back and spent most of my years there up till about grade 10. Then I went to the public school in Cardston, promptly got kicked out. Went to 40 Cloud, got kicked out. Well, McLeod didn't get kicked out. I left before that. Just when the I was going to say, you're being kicked out. I said, no, don't bother, I'm leaving. So that was a bit of a victory there too. So after that, once I got old enough, that's when I decided, no more of this, what I've been taught. We have our own ways, and you can't tell me that it's not worth anything. I was baptized a Catholic, but I had no choice. Our people didn't have a choice. Basically our reserve was split in half. They said, okay, you ain't no kids have these, unless Catholics were. And then with my kids, I made sure they're going from where they are. All of them have their Blackfoot names from very powerful sources. And all they know is our. So, but the thing was, after when I started reflecting on it, I thought, I'll never know what it's like to just know our. That's what our people like before. But for me, I always have to think critically, okay, is this Christianity or is this our way? So I have to kind of weed my way through. And I still do that every now and then. I think, be careful, am I taking it the wrong direction? Okay. Kaki itsemahkakko kakitako kapuatuistutsissa kiumi uhtsanakko peaniksaaki tusksnimaatseeksi. Uustia oman stanska tuopuaissa residential schools. Kiniksi itukkuimmiksi. Kiniksa ita poiks maatanoskuut kajiksi tukapsia niidisknimaatseeksi. Ajana kui avaki uminskio taakitsepsuakaki. Ni täsuissina kiokimi suupatsis. Ni kakiako kapuatsimukskuutaki. Yeah, I've been asked to bless and honor the display that's been put up. There's a desk there, there's a chair, and that's a memorial for all the residential school students that not only attended there, but many of which never got to go back home. And so I'm going to say a little prayer about that in memory of those children that went there. I was one that went, but I was lucky I ran away. I was never brought back. But I lost two uncles there. All my siblings went from my youngest sister on up to the oldest one out of 11 children. And both my parents spent most of their lifetime there. So we are all affected by those schools. And only today are we starting to return to that knowledge that we were prevented from transferring from one generation to another. Ayo na pinatos. Ayo soksikakskoksak kinanin kakiksustikui. Anika kikiagoktensk katsmakko anika kikanasukakika. Okinigokpa peipuyokpa kiniksaki. Tsistapa kinaniksaki pokaoka kinidai lotusksnimatsuksa. Okinniksaki stapimoiksaki katitape. Ukatapape kuya kinikimakukuni maksawa kanika magtapukuisuki sawa yo makunawa saka sawa naksaki wansiki matakuchika wakaki pandera kunsta o kamanishpina o ki takots tapito kinano kiwa tapio kaki kanikaki tehuina kinikaki stapina nansaki destimans Nasuka in Kite Kokam Stukna Next. Mazit Nikakse Puma Pipana Pita Tokam Stuch. Oh, the Konito Pinan Nikaki. Stu Kitaka, the supports the Pitu Chipina. Oh, Kinikak was some bad BC Kits, Naksha BC.
Today I'll be singing the Secwepemc honor song in honor of the children that we have lost. Hey ho, 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 hey hi, hey ho, hey ya.
As long as the grass grows, river flows. As long as the wind blows, that's how love will be for all eternity.